Hello everyone, welcome back. Here is the next episode of my Zero build. This time I'm going to show you how I build the 3D printed tailwheel for the A6M2 Zero Type21 project. We have two options if we want to upgrade the tailwheel. The resin wheel set contains the main landing wheels and the tailwheel. The more advanced set is a 3D printed upgrade set, which includes a highly detailed tailwheel and the tailwheel cover as well. I purchased both of the sets and obviously I used the 3D printed one for the tailwheel. This is my favorite part of this aircraft. This tailwheel looks so cool, it's a very interesting piece of engineering. There are only 4 high-quality printed parts in the package and the paint mask. The instruction sheet is typical Eduard, it is informative and easy to understand. I cut the print supports from the parts. For this delicate work, I used my trusty Tamiya side cutter. I use this side cutter exclusively for plastic to keep its sharpness. Be careful and patient while cutting off the supports. The parts are extremely fragile. Unfortunately, I broke one of the parts. If I had been more patient, I could have avoided this problem, so learn from my mistake and be careful. So finally, I had not 4, 5 parts. After I cut and cleaned all the parts, I had to prepare the fuselage and cut off the tail. I used a razor saw and a pinwise. I learned from my previous mistake and cut it very slowly and carefully. We should follow the panel lines, and if we do, the resin part will perfectly fit into it. Also, the tailhook cavity part needs to be modified to create space for the printed back part. The plastic part D5 from the kit was glued with Tamiya extra thin cement. After I glued the 2 fuselage parts together with a fine file, I finalized the cavity for the 3D part. Do this step by step to make the pocket for the 3D part. When the fit was perfect, I used JS superglue to glue the parts together. It looks already pretty good. The next step was the primer to prepare the parts for the paint. Most of the time I use primer because it creates a solid base for the paint job and shows the imperfections on the surface. In this step I realized that the surface is not smooth. The printed layers are visible on the surface, especially after the primer. Now we are talking about microscopic steps, and it's not really visible with bare eyes, but through the sharp lens it is definitely visible. All the parts and the surface details are incredibly delicate, so I was super careful when sanding the surface back. After the primer, I applied a thin layer of Tamiya XF76 paint. There are many articles and debates about the right color of these aircraft. Some of the recommended paints are too greenish or too grayish for me. This tone looks quite right out of the bottle. For pre-shading, I used highly diluted white paint and painted marble patches on the surface. I highlighted the edges and the rivet lines with a mixture of XF76 grey-green and XF7 flat red paints. For this delicate work I used my Sparmark 0.2mm airbrush. Finally, I finished the surface with a few layers of thin XF76 final color. I like to build the color layer by layer. I will describe the whole painting process in one of the upcoming videos. For the rest of the details, I used acrylic paints and various brushes. For the bluish-green shade, the Otake coating, I choose Mr. Hobby Metallic Blue-Green. There are numerous articles online discussing the various shades of Otake coating used during production, and it's clear that there is no definitive right or wrong shade. I specifically used the H63 paint recommended in the instruction. Gluing the tailwheel into its place wasn't easy because I broke it, as I mentioned before. I used a touch of GS superglue to hold the hydraulic piston in place and then glued the lower section of the mechanism, again with GS superglue. GS superglue gave me a bit of extra time to adjust the parts together. After I was happy with the positions, I fixed every connection point with a touch of extra quick dry superglue. Now all the parts in place, so let's put extra details on to make it more interesting. I followed the instructions, but I also modified and added a bit to the tailwheel to make it more interesting. 4 hydraulics lines were running to the tailwheel, 2 on each side. I used 0.3 and 0.4 mm lead wires to make them. The instructions clearly show where to glue the wires. First, I glued the lead wire onto the back frame. I waited to dry the superglue properly, and then I formed the lead wire to the right shape to the right point. Cut the excess with a small scissors and glued the end of the wire. I like to use lead wires, so easy to shape them to the desired form. After the glue dried, I painted them camouflage color and at the port side silver color. Most of the World War II fighters' tailwheel is quite simple. This hydraulic mechanism looks very busy and interesting. I saw an original picture of a tail section. The aircraft was under maintenance by the ground crew, and the tail was lifted and placed on a fuel drum. The cover was off, so all the fine details were visible. I saw in this picture that there are 2 thin control wires running to the rudder, and also 2 thin control wires running to the tailwheel. Easy little details, so why shouldn't I have made them? I used Albion Alloy's thin nickel-silver rod. Before I placed the rods, I drilled 2 holes on the back frame and 2 holes in the wheel frame to make space for the wires. I cut approximately 5 mm long wires, and with GS superglue I carefully glued them into the holes and at the attach points. After a bit of weathering, I called it done. This part was definitely my favorite section of the Zero. This tailwheel shows that Japanese engineering is totally different from Western engineering in aviation. I really enjoyed building this upgrade set, highly recommend. It was easy to build and surely brought the model to the next level visually. I hope you enjoyed this short video and had a good time. I would really appreciate if you hit the like and subscribe with the little bell. That would keep my motivation high. Keep modeling, and I see you in the next episode.